In the winter of 2016, while I was a divinity school student, I had the opportunity to hear a lecture by the renowned research professor of social work and storyteller, Dr. Brené Brown. The title of her talk was More Brave and Less Perfect, Creating a Culture of Courage at Vanderbilt. The event was held to support the launch of a campus-wide initiative called Imperfection Project, a project designed to focus on the mental health issues that arise from the fear of failure. As the university's Center for Spiritual and Religious website noted, the Imperfection Project wants to foster a Vanderbilt community where students can bravely share their stories of good failures, as well as their journey of self-acceptance. And while Brown's talk was mostly geared towards the university's undergraduate population and their experience of being new, young students, it held the same scientific research and wisdom on shame, empathy, courage, and vulnerability as her numerous best-selling books. It also illuminated the same points of her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, which she had done 6 years prior. As she shared in that talk, when she reviewed the data collected from stories shared by wholehearted people, those she had interviewed who had a strong sense of worthiness, love, and belonging, all had something in common: a deep sense of courage. As Brown explains, they embodied the original definition of courage: to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart. She found that these folks had the courage to be imperfect and had the compassion to be kind to themselves and others. And they made connections by being authentic. As she shares, they were willing to let go of who they thought they should be in order to be who they were, which you have to absolutely do for that connection. Lastly, she notes, they fully embraced vulnerability. They believed that it made them more beautiful. They didn't talk about vulnerability being comfortable, nor did they really talk about it being excruciating, as I had heard in earlier interviews about shame. They just talked about it being necessary. They thought this was fundamental. Brown's research also showed her that this willingness to be vulnerable, to be open-hearted, to take chances, and to be seen prevents one from numbing themselves from the full experience of life. As she shares, you cannot selectively numb emotion. You can't say, here's the bad stuff, here's vulnerability, here's grief, here's shame, here's fear, here's disappointment. I don't want to feel these. You can't numb those hard feelings, she notes, without numbing the other affects, our emotions. You cannot selectively numb. So when we numb those, we numb joy, we numb gratitude, we numb happiness. And then she says, we are miserable. And when we are miserable, it affects how we move through the world, how we treat ourselves and others. It creates a pattern and a cycle of despair and numbing, despair and numbing. But if we have the courage to embrace all of who we are and to work on healing ourselves, we have the potential to flower into wholehearted people. Every time I watch the TED Talk or think back to the evening of the lecture, the same experience comes over me. My body warms, and I think, this is the scientific evidence of what we experienced in Elizabeth's acting class. When I was in my 20s, my dream of becoming a professional actress took me to New York City. I met the woman who was to become my mentor during my first year at a musical and dramatic academy. I studied with her for many years and during different periods of my life. Part of the work we did with Elizabeth was reclaiming our voices and embracing the facets of ourselves. As I wrote in my thesis for divinity school, Through guided explorations, I fought hard to reclaim my voice. In the beginning, I never faced my fellow students as I worked. I looked at the back wall and I sobbed and I said no, a lot. Eventually, I turned towards the receptive faces, openly postured bodies, and upward palms. I shared the sounds and gestures and words that lived deep inside within me. For a long time, the experience of energy moving through me was so great I had to stand with my arms outstretched. For others, the experience of embodiment and being seen brought up other responses. Some nearly passed out, while others became physically ill, and others fought hard to remain present. And in those moments, Elizabeth would always say, "Who do you see?" And we anchored and connected with someone in class. This phrase initially invited us to stay connected to others, maintain the flow of giving and receiving, and commune with one another. Through such exploration and connection, we witnessed how reclaiming voice and embodiment changed the way someone moved through the world, the glow of their face, and the energy and spirit of the community. Janet Armstrong, a children's author, and Lisa Dungate, a child and family therapist, might say that we experienced at least two kinds of courage doing that work: emotional and social. On their website, Lion's Whiskers, they describe emotional courage as being open to feeling the full spectrum of emotional experience, both positive and negative. And social courage as standing up tall, being able to greet the world with your head held high, feeling comfortable in your own skin. Social courage means not conforming to the expectations of others, being willing to show your true self, even if it means risking social disapproval or punishment. In many ways, we also experienced moral and spiritual courage. As we deepened our connections to folks who were different than us, we widened our world and our respect and honor for the other. Armstrong and Dungate write that moral courage requires us to make judgments about what actions or behaviors are supportive of our highest ideals and which ones are destructive. It asks us to recognize our responsibilities and see the consequences of our own actions. As we heard the voices and stories of others, we witnessed the traumas and the joys that rippled through their lives and understood that every interaction has the potential to lift someone up or tear them down. We were taught how to share constructive criticism based on reverence and championing, to honor and celebrate every endeavor made to reclaim self, because the struggle in and of itself is an expression of self. The space became safe and sacred because we committed to it being safe and sacred, exemplifying what Armstrong and Dungate describe as spiritual courage that fortifies us when we grapple with questions about faith, purpose, and meaning, either in a religious or non-religious framework. So what might all of this have to do with radical hospitality and beloved community? As Reverend McKinley shared a few weeks ago, radical hospitality not only makes people feel welcomed, makes sure everyone was seen, noticed, valued, belonged. It leads to a wholeness and healing and transformation. To me, this is an active call from radical hospitality to remain committed to nurturing our own courage and vulnerability so that our hearts may be present and open to the other who arrives, to witness the stories that have rippled through their lives, to the courage it might have taken for them to walk through our sanctuary doors. Radical hospitality asks us to remain present to the way that our community transforms and blossoms as new people arrive and familiar faces return. It asks us to embrace the uncomfortableness that this might awaken, to know that if we continue to see each other, to see receptive faces, openly postured bodies, and upward palms, we will grow and change and celebrate the fullness of our diversity. And beloved community calls us to remain steadfast to the 8 principles that we hold as values and moral guides, to continually embrace those learnings that help us to transform our community so that we eradicate the norms and structures that cause harm and marginalize others. Beloved community reminds us that kindness, as Reverend Kimberly DeBuse writes, sees a need and offers to help, stands up for the person being bullied, and then makes sure they're safe. Kindness, she continues, disrupts lawlessness and incivility, goes out of its way, knows its privilege, and uses it to build justice. Kindness is not easy, she says. Kindness is sometimes uncomfortable because it requires us to not stay comfortable, to not stay nice and docile. It asks us to remain courageous, understanding that transformation will come by remaining willing and present. Beloved community asks us to answer how we can all become freer today. So today, let's take a moment to honor how courageous our hearts have been by placing our hand upon our hearts. And let us encourage ourselves to continue the journey to becoming wholehearted folks. Blessed be, and amen.